This video is the fourth in a 10-part series on the Bitcoin Standard, a book by economist Safdin Ammous. This series includes 10 videos, one for each chapter of the book, and this video focuses on the information contained within Chapter 4. Chapter 4: Government Money. At the end of World War I, governments stopped allowing their money to be freely decided by their citizens and began imposing government money, or fiat money, on them. Fiat means by order or decree. So fiat money is decided artificially by a government, elected official, or a dictator. However, contrary to the name, all fiat currencies originally were redeemable in gold or silver, or a foreign currency, which was redeemable in gold or silver. Without the redeemability for gold or silver, governments would not have been able to impose the paper money in the first place. The first recorded example of a fiat currency occurred in China in the 900s, which was redeemable in gold or silver, but the government increased the supply of paper notes until the currency collapsed. The same thing happened later in China in 1260. Government money, or fiat money, is similar to primitive monies like the yap stones or glass beads, in that their supply can be quickly and easily increased, which leads to destruction of the purchasing power of the money and ultimately the collapse of the economy. Monetary nationalism and the end of the free world. Within a few weeks of the start of World War I, all major combatant countries effectively went off the gold standard in order to print enough money to finance the war. This was done by stopping the redeemability of each paper currency for gold. Had governments remained on the gold standard, military spending would have been limited to existing gold reserves, and the war would have likely only lasted a few months, instead of 4 years. The evidence for this is that previous wars on the gold standard were extremely short-lived and not expensive. This shows the exchange rate of each major national currency involved in World War I in relation to the Swiss franc, which remained on the gold standard during World War I. This devaluation of each currency led to a centrally planned system called monetary nationalism, in which monetary policy is decided by individuals instead of the free market. Bitcoin, being outside the control of any government, offers an intriguing possibility for the emergence of a new international monetary system. The interwar era. Before World War I, under the international gold standard, money flowed freely between nations, and the exchange rate between them was simply the conversion of weights of gold. Under the new monetary nationalism, exchange rates between currencies were determined by agreements and meetings. In 1922, the Treaty of Genoa was enacted and was the first major law of monetary nationalism. Under this treaty, the US dollar and the British pound were to be considered reserve currency, similar to gold in other countries' reserves. This began the move toward the inflation of currencies in order to fix economic problems. England tried to use the pre-war price for gold in pounds, but there had been a huge increase in pound notes. This caused other countries to deplete Britain's gold reserves rapidly, until England asked the U.S. to rapidly increase its own printing of money in order to help stop the exodus of gold from England to the U.S. The U.S. agreed and inflated the dollar throughout the 1920s, ending in 1928, right before the 1929 stock market crash, which led to the longest depression in modern recorded history. This depression was intensified by Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal policies of keeping wages artificially high, causing high unemployment and lowered production because employers couldn't afford their wages, while also keeping the price of agricultural products high, causing mass hunger. Producers of many crops actually had to burn their products in order to keep supply low and prices artificially high, while many Americans went hungry and without jobs. In order to allow even more inflation of the dollar, President Roosevelt ordered the banning of private ownership of gold, and forced Americans to sell their gold to the U.S. Treasury. This effectively outlawed the use of sound money in the form of gold. It was the prevailing view at this time that any rise in unemployment or slowdown in production was the result of shortage of spending, and in order to spend more, governments simply printed more paper, diluting the value of all currency held by its citizens. This philosophy was known as Keynesian economics, after John Maynard Keynes, who himself had not studied nor researched economics. The cause of the Great Crash of 1929 was the diversion away from the gold standard, and the deepening of the following depression was the result of government control of the economy and move away from the free market. World War II and Bretton Woods. World War II saw unprecedented spending and low unemployment for those countries involved. Under the Keynesian model, all spending is treated equally because it all reduces unemployment. Whether that spending be of individuals feeding their families or militaries murdering foreigners is irrelevant to this ideology. During World War II, food had to be rationed, and construction of new housing and repair of existing housing had to be halted completely due to military spending. So the case can be made that war was bad for both soldiers dying in battle and also the families who remained at home. This military spending led to an enormous industry, causing President Eisenhower to warn of a growing military-industrial complex that controls government by demanding ever more funding and driving U.S. foreign policy toward an endless series of expensive wars with no rational end, goal, or objective. At the end of World War II, the U.S. summoned its allies to Bretton Woods in New Hampshire to create a new global trading system. The result of this meeting was that the U.S. dollar became the global reserve currency. Dollars would be redeemable in gold at a fixed rate, and the U.S. took gold from other countries to facilitate this agreement. The U.S. did not abide by this agreement and began altering the exchange rate in their favor. Bretton Woods introduced the International Monetary Fund, with the purpose of stabilizing exchange rates between currencies. This did not work, and many countries devalued their currency in order to pay debts with money printed out of thin air, with no backing. Government money's track record. The redeemability of U.S. dollars for a finite amount of gold, combined with a potentially infinite expansion of the dollar supply, led to a higher gold price. As various countries realized the diminishing power of their inflated paper currency, they began to demand their gold reserves back from the U.S. French President Charles de Gaulle sent a French military carrier ship to New York Harbor to get France's gold back. When Germany attempted to reclaim their gold from the U.S., and with gold reserves running low, President Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility to gold in 1971. In effect, the U.S. has defaulted on its promise set about at Bretton Woods. This led to a rapid increase in printing of dollars, along with a rise in prices of virtually everything. Interestingly, the mainstream view blamed everything except the true source of the problem, which was the increase in the money supply, which dilutes purchasing power of the currency. This was a worldwide phenomena, as the global reserve currency was the U.S. dollar, and it was rapidly increasing in supply. As an example of this diminishing purchasing power, in 1971, an ounce of gold was worth $35. Today, it's worth over $1,900. That means the dollar buys over 50 times less gold than it did just a few decades ago. Even the relatively low average inflation rate of 5% per year will double the money supply of any country in only 15 years. Hyperinflation, defined as a 50% increase in prices in 1 month, is an economic disaster that is unique to fiat money and has never happened under the gold standard. Hyperinflation has happened 56 times since the end of World War I and the abandonment of the gold standard. The most vivid example of a hyperinflating currency was that of the Weimar Republic in the 1920s, which led to the breakdown of a leading world economy and also the rise of Adolf Hitler to power. Be sure to watch the next video in this 10-part series, which will summarize Chapter 5 of the Bitcoin Standard. Chapter 5 is entitled Money and Time Preference, and it explains several important concepts, including time preference and inflation. Please like, subscribe, and check out the next video.